The political world just watched a rising progressive star collide head-on with the most unpredictable force in American politics, and the shockwaves are still spreading. Zoran Mamdani, whose rapid ascent in New York has rattled both establishment Democrats and local power brokers, reached a breaking point that set off a chain reaction he didn't expect and definitely couldn't control. One moment, he was speaking to his base with the fiery conviction that made him famous. The next, he was in the middle of a national storm after Donald Trump responded with a single calculated remark that instantly reframed the entire situation. Trump didn't need to unload on him. He didn't need a rant, a rally, or a thread. One reaction was enough to shift the center of gravity. When Trump comments on something, anything, it stops being a local political dispute. It becomes national. And that's where Mamdani suddenly found himself, elevated to a national stage he wasn't preparing to stand on. Now his team is scrambling. Not because they fear Trump, but because they fear the velocity of the narrative that now surrounds him. Once Trump reacts, the moment doesn't belong to you anymore. It becomes part of a larger political ecosystem where every faction interprets it through its own lens, its own agenda, its own media pipeline. That's the real fallout Mamdani is dealing with. Let's break down what actually happened beneath the surface, the part you won't see in headlines or sanitized political analysis. Mamdani's rise has been built on clarity. He doesn't hedge, he doesn't triangulate. He doesn't deliver the poll-tested, consultant-approved messaging that defines modern politicians. He speaks with the type of ideological sharpness that excites a passionate base and infuriates his opponents. But clarity in an era of hyper-amplification is volatile. When everything you say is instantly nationalized, a message designed for your supporters doesn't stay with your supporters. It travels, it mutates, it gets interpreted, weaponized, dissected, and repackaged. So when Mamdani delivered a hard-edged critique, one meant to energize his progressive movement, it didn't stay inside the lane he assumed it would. It landed squarely in front of Trump, a man who knows better than anyone how to turn a moment into a megaphone. Trump's response wasn't aggressive, it was strategic, and that's why it was so effective. He turned Mamdani's message into a national storyline with 10 times the force Mamdani intended within hours. Progressive outlets praised Mamdani for being bold. Conservative outlets framed him as reckless. Mainstream media described it as a flashpoint. Donors texted staffers asking if they should be worried. Operatives looked at poll models to see if this could shift races. Party insiders debated whether Mamdani was an asset or a liability. This is how fast politics moves now. Not when you've built a national base, but when the national base decides you're part of its conversation. That's the part Mamdani didn't anticipate. For the first time, he's dealing with a national spotlight that isn't entirely under his control. And that's dangerous for a politician whose strength comes from message discipline within a specific ideological lane. Behind the scenes, his team is trying to contain the blowback. Some advisors want him to lean into the moment, framing it as proof that he can take on powerful opponents. Others want him to soften, recalibrate, and show voters he's not just an ideological firebrand. Fundraisers are panicking over the unpredictability of the situation. Local Democratic leaders are furious that Mamdani has dragged Trump into a race they wanted to keep insulated. The progressive base is celebrating, telling him not to back down an inch. He's being pulled in 5 directions at once. And this is where the political danger lies, not in the clash itself, but in the confusion it creates inside his own coalition. When you rise quickly, your foundation isn't always fully built. One national shock can reveal the cracks. What Trump did, intentionally or instinctively, was force Mamdani into a position where every faction now demands a different response. But here's the larger point. The one that explains why this moment matters beyond Mamdani or Trump. We are living in a political environment where no fight is small anymore. Everything is connected. Everything becomes national. Everything becomes content. Everything becomes weaponized. Local politics used to be local. Now local politics can go global before the candidate finishes the speech. And because of that, Mamdani isn't just dealing with a policy dispute. He's dealing with the structural reality of modern influence. The line between national and local power no longer exists. This is the new world. One statement can turn a city candidate into a national headline. One reaction from Trump can redefine someone's entire political identity. One viral clip can reshape donor enthusiasm for months. One narrative shift can fracture a coalition or build one overnight. Mamdani is experiencing all of that in real time. The real question, the one that will define his rise or fall, is how he responds. Because right now, he has 2 options. Option 1, lean into the moment, becoming the national progressive firebrand the base already sees him as. Option 2, retreat, recalibrate, and try to minimize the fallout before the narrative locks in permanently. Whichever path he chooses, he won't get a second chance. This moment will define him, either as the progressive who stood firm under national pressure, or the candidate who blinked when the spotlight hit too early. Mamdani is standing at a crossroads he didn't expect to reach this early in his political rise. And the most fascinating part is that every direction in front of him leads to a completely different version of his future. That's how disruptive this clash with Trump became. Not because of the content of the disagreement, but because of the scale of the reaction Trump moved the moment onto a national stage. Now Mamdani has to decide whether to perform or survive. The political class loves to pretend they understand these moments, but they don't. They think in terms of polls, donors, statements, op-eds, consultants. They don't understand how influence actually works in a world where the narrative is shaped by platforms, not press releases. So let's look at the real strategic landscape Mamdani is staring at right now. There are 3 factions around him, and each is pulling him toward a different outcome. Faction 1, the progressive base. Go harder. These are the activists, organizers, and younger voters who propelled Mamdani into relevance. They want confrontation. They want defiance. They want ideological purity and ideological clarity. They see any engagement with Trump, even accidental, as an opportunity to sharpen the contrast between their movement and the political establishment. To them, Mamdani shouldn't walk anything back. He should escalate, double down, turn the clash into a symbol of resistance, not a misstep. This group is loud, it's passionate, and it's deeply loyal, until it isn't. If Mamdani backs away now, they won't forgive it. They don't respect retreat. Faction 2. The local pragmatists. Control the damage. These are the people who understand power on the ground. Union leaders, city officials, district-level operatives, community organizations. They don't hate Mamdani, but they don't love surprises. Their biggest fear isn't Trump, it's chaos. They want predictability. They want discipline. They want a candidate who doesn't drag a national firestorm into their backyard. To them, Mamdani needs to play defense, smooth things over, reframe the moment as taken out of context or misinterpreted. They want the national media off his back and the local voters back in focus. They're not ideological, they're strategic, and they can cripple or strengthen a campaign at the local level more effectively than any viral moment can. Faction 3, the party establishment. We warned you. This is the faction that never liked Mamdani's rise in the first place. They see progressive insurgents as threats to party stability, fundraising networks, and long-term strategy. So when Mamdani collided with Trump, this faction didn't panic. They smiled. To them, this was inevitable. A candidate like Mamdani was always going to face a moment he couldn't control, and they're ready to use this as evidence that he's not ready for prime time. They're opportunistic. They're calculating. And they're waiting for him to make the wrong move so they can push for a more reliable alternative. Now here's the challenge. Mamdani cannot satisfy all 3 factions. He must choose. And this decision will define whether he becomes a long-term political force or a cautionary tale. So what are his actual options? Option 1, lean into the confrontation and become a national progressive icon. This option turns the clash with Trump into fuel. Mamdani can position himself as the voice of a movement unafraid to stand up to the most influential conservative figure in the country. This is the path that elevates him, expands his base, brings national attention, and turns him into a symbol that resonates far beyond New York, but it comes with risk. He'll alienate moderates, he'll activate national opposition, he'll lose local establishment support, he'll become a target for every media outlet that wants drama. Choosing this path means betting everything on momentum. Option 2, de-escalate, soften the moment, and protect his district. This keeps him safe in the short term. It reassures donors, calms down local leaders, and signals that he's disciplined enough to be a stable political actor. But it also dilutes his identity. Progressives will accuse him of backing down. His base could lose faith. He could look like he blinked under pressure. Choosing this path means sacrificing momentum for stability. Option 3, reframe the moment entirely. Neither escalation nor retreat. This is the most sophisticated option. Mamdani could transform the moment into a broader conversation about political courage, working-class issues, or the failures of the status quo. Instead of directly responding to Trump or softening his message, he could pivot to the underlying issues that fueled his original statement. This would let him hold his progressive base while avoiding full-scale war with national figures. It's the diplomatic route, but one that requires exceptional messaging skill. This path is difficult, but if executed well, it's the one that elevates him without burning him out. Now here's where the plot thickens. Trump's reaction forced Mamdani into a national frame, but that frame cuts both ways. For the first time, Mamdani has the attention of audiences he never expected to reach. People who didn't know his name last week now have an opinion about him. And in modern politics, that kind of visibility can launch a career or destroy it, because visibility is neutral. It only becomes good or bad depending on what you do with it. Mamdani's real challenge isn't Trump's reaction, it's what comes after. Trump moved the spotlight. Now Mamdani must decide how to stand in it. But here's the deeper truth. He can't return to being just a local progressive figure anymore. That era is gone. The collision pushed him onto a larger stage whether he wanted it or not. And once you're in the national spotlight, you don't get to choose when it turns off. Mamdani's crossroads moment didn't stay theoretical for long. His next moves, some public, some discreet, some whispered through back channels, are already revealing exactly which path he's leaning toward. And the reaction has been just as divided and dramatic as you'd expect, when an unexpected clash with Trump turns a local politician into a national talking point overnight. What's clear now is that Mamdani isn't simply trying to survive the moment, he's trying to shape it. And that's what makes this next stage so fascinating. He knows he can't rewind what happened, he knows he can't pretend Trump didn't respond, and he knows he can't hide from the spotlight that suddenly swung toward him. So instead of retreating into silence or doubling down recklessly, he's testing a hybrid strategy. One that tries to satisfy his base without inflaming the factions already sharpening their knives. But there's a problem. In politics, hybrid strategies rarely stay balanced for long. They tip, they lean, they break under pressure, and Mamdani is discovering that the forces around him are stronger, louder, and less predictable than he expected. Let's break down what's actually happening behind the scenes. 1. Mamdani's public posture is defiant, but measured. He hasn't apologized. He hasn't backed down, but he also hasn't escalated the conflict with Trump directly. Instead, he's subtly reframing the entire moment as a fight about larger issues, power, inequality, and the direction of the country. This allows him to say, essentially, this isn't about Trump versus Mamdani. This is about who shapes the future. That framing protects him from looking weak to progressives while avoiding a direct head-on confrontation that the media would love, but that could bury him. Is it working? Partially, but the reactions are mixed. 2. His progressive base is fired up and demanding more. To the activists who championed Mamdani from the beginning, this moment feels electric. They think he's proved he can provoke national attention. They're pushing him to go farther, speak louder, turn the clash into a symbol of generational change. Their message to him is blunt. Don't waste this. You have momentum, but momentum can be a trap. It can carry you forward, or carry you off a cliff. 3. The party establishment is now openly circling. There's no more quiet skepticism, no more subtle distancing. Figures connected to the local party apparatus are whispering that this is exactly the kind of instability they warned about when Mamdani began rising. They're calling donors, calling consultants, calling potential challengers, not out of fear, but out of opportunity. A moment like this gives them the opening to argue that the district needs someone stable, serious, and predictable. In political language, those are code words for not Mamdani. This is the faction that hopes the moment gets worse for him, and they're working to make sure it does. 4. Trump world is amused but attentive. This might be the most interesting part. Trump didn't escalate his initial reaction, but his allies, commentators, and online supporters have kept the conversation alive, not with coordinated attacks, but with a steady drip of commentary framing Mamdani as a symbol of what they see as the extreme left. That narrative isn't about Mamdani personally, it's about using him as shorthand for a broader political argument. For Trump world, Mamdani is useful, not as an enemy to destroy, but as an example to amplify. This means the moment isn't fading, it's evolving. 5th. Mamdani's team is split internally. Some staffers think he should turn the moment into a full progressive rallying cry. Others want to refocus on district issues to avoid national overexposure. A smaller but influential group wants him to pivot to a message of competence, passion plus practicality. This internal struggle mirrors the external one. Mamdani is being asked to embody 4 different versions of himself at once, and that's the real danger: identity strain. When a rising politician is forced to choose between base loyalty, party stability, national attention, and message discipline, something eventually breaks. Either the coalition breaks, or the messaging breaks, or the candidate himself bends under the weight. Mamdani is learning what every rising figure learns eventually. The higher you rise, the fewer versions of yourself you're allowed to be. Now let's talk about the move he made that reveals the most. Mamdani recently shifted his tone, not dramatically, but subtly. His latest public remarks weren't about Trump at all. They were about systemic issues, community needs, and policy failures. This is a strategic redirect, and it's not an accident. Here's what that tells us. He's trying to reposition himself as the thinker, not the brawler. He knows he can't outshout Trump. He knows he can't win a spectacle war. He knows he can't build a career on viral outrage alone. So he's trying something very unusual in modern politics. He's using the moment for elevation, not escalation. By doing this, Mamdani is signaling, I'm not here to fight Trump. I'm here to fight the system Trump exploited. That's a message his base loves. It's one moderates can tolerate. It's one donors can accept. And it's one the national media can't fully pigeonhole. This is smart, but it's also high risk, because in the modern political landscape, nuance doesn't travel as fast as conflict. Subtlety doesn't go viral as quickly as a clash. Elevated rhetoric doesn't drown out the noise. It often gets lost beneath it. So here's where the situation stands. Mamdani wants to move forward. Trump world wants to keep him frozen in the moment. The progressive base wants escalation. The establishment wants a misstep. Local pragmatists want calm. All of these forces are pulling him simultaneously. That's why this moment feels unstable, because it is. And now comes the real test. This drama has evolved from a clash into a storyline, from a moment into a narrative, from a reaction into an identity test. Mamdani has reached the point where every rising politician eventually finds themselves, the moment when the storm quiets just enough for the real consequences to take shape, not the noise, not the outrage, not the headlines, the consequences. This is where the future gets decided. Not by Trump's reaction, not by a viral clip, not by the factions arguing over what he should do. This final phase is determined by how Mamdani positions himself in the aftermath, whether he emerges as a resilient political force or as someone whose rise was interrupted by pressure he wasn't prepared to handle. Right now, he's standing on the edge of both possibilities. Let's break down the landscape he's stepping into. 1. The progressive base has made its expectations unmistakably clear. To them, this moment is a gift, a chance to elevate Mamdani into the national progressive conversation. They're pushing him to embrace the spotlight, not hide from it. They want him to own the confrontation, even if he didn't seek it out. They don't want apology. They don't want moderation. They want conviction. Their energy is powerful, but it's also volatile. If Mamdani disappoints them now, the loyalty that lifted him could evaporate just as quickly. Progressive momentum is intense, but it demands consistency. 2. The party establishment is preparing for the long game. They know this moment won't sink him immediately, but they also know that early vulnerabilities can be exploited in future primaries, endorsements, and internal power struggles. They're already positioning themselves to argue that Mamdani is too unpredictable to be the face of any future leadership role. They'll do it quietly, strategically, through intermediaries, through donors, through whispers that start small and grow into consensus over time. To them, Mamdani's clash with Trump is not a problem, it's an opportunity. 3. Local power brokers are calculating risk. These are the people who care more about stability than ideology. They're the ones who have to answer to constituents who don't live on Twitter and don't obsess over national politics. To them, Mamdani's challenge isn't Trump. It's the unpredictability of national attention. They need reassurance that Mamdani can handle the pressure without dragging their entire political ecosystem into chaos. If he can do that, they'll back him. If he can't, they'll quietly start paving the way for alternatives. 4. Trump world has moved into observation mode. They're not escalating yet, but they're paying attention closely. Mamdani's name has now entered the broader cultural conversation. And once someone enters that orbit, Trump's allies will decide whether he's useful as an opponent, an example, or simply a foil for larger narratives. For them, Mamdani is no longer just a New York progressive. He's a potential symbol. Whether he becomes a target or a talking point depends entirely on what he does next. 5th. The media is waiting to define the story, one way or another. Journalists love a rise. They love a fall even more. But what they love most is a transformation. Mamdani has given them the first act, the rise, and the second act, the clash. The third act, the evolution, is ready to be written, and the press will frame that evolution based on the signals Mamdani sends now. If he emerges stronger, they'll call it resilience. If he stumbles, they'll call it overreach. If he pivots, they'll call it recalibration. If he hesitates, they'll call it uncertainty. In politics, perception doesn't follow reality, it shapes it. Now, here's the part that determines everything. Does Mamdani see himself as a local actor who stumbled into a national moment, or a national actor who was disguised as a local one until now? If he sees himself as local, he'll play defense, he'll contain, he'll recenter his message on district-level concerns, he'll try to shrink the spotlight until it moves on. This would protect him from immediate damage, but it would also cap his potential. He would return to the path he was on, slower and quieter, but safer. If he sees himself as national, he'll embrace the spotlight, not as a performer, but as a leader. He'll use this moment to amplify the issues he cares about. He'll expand his audience. He'll elevate his rhetoric. He'll step into the arena willingly, not accidentally. This path is high risk, but also high reward. And here's the truth. Mamdani's recent moves suggest he's leaning toward the second interpretation. He's not fully escalating, but he's not shrinking either. He's repositioning. Deliberately, he's framing himself as someone with a vision larger than his district. He's speaking about systemic challenges, not just local ones. He's presenting himself as part of a broader generational shift. This is what rising national figures look like before they know they're rising. But if Mamdani chooses this path, it comes with a cost. He will never again be treated like a local politician. Every word will be scrutinized. Every misstep will go national. Every conflict will scale instantly. You can't step into a larger arena and expect the stakes to stay the same. And that's what Mamdani is deciding in real time, whether to embrace a future where the spotlight follows him instead of him chasing it. Now let's talk about what the next phase could look like. If Mamdani continues on this trajectory, he could become one of the most prominent progressive voices of his generation, the kind that shapes national conversations and pressures the Democratic Party from the left in ways that shift policy, messaging, and strategy. Or he could be crushed by the very spotlight that lifted him. That's the dual nature of visibility. It elevates as quickly as it exposes, it builds as quickly as it fractures, it amplifies strengths and weaknesses. The final question is the simplest, but also the most important. Does Mamdani understand that this moment wasn't an accident, but an initiation? He didn't plan for it, he didn't seek it, but he's in it now. And the future he chooses will not only define his career, it will shape the progressive movement's next chapter, because the truth is this: some politicians rise because they chase power, others rise because power finds them. Mamdani is in the rare second category. What he does with that makes all the difference.